Look, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I held off on doing this video for ages. I genuinely paid it no mind, thinking it was something like the Hunger Games, but then reading up on it and then seeing it had zombies piqued my interest, especially with the lore behind it. It is extensive, but I still hesitated until I saw that view count Roanoke had on his video covering Maze Runner, and I was like, damn! But what comes from a man-made virus bioengineered for the thinning of mankind? Well, that question kind of answers itself. How would you fare against the gigantic cataclysm of this world that led to all this going down? Will you crank one out and have a flair for the zombie dramatic? Today, we are telling you why you wouldn't survive Maze Runner's flare virus zombie apocalypse. Surviving day to day can be a chore, a bore, and maybe include some gore, but you can ignore the problems the world has in store, even if raging zombies are out the door. Yes, I'm spitting bars thanks to today's sponsor, Raycon. I joined up and rocked those Raycons back in 2020, and 4 years later, they have improved their earbuds, launching an upgraded model of their best-selling everyday earbuds. I would definitely say now is the time to check them out, as they're affordable and more comfortable than ever, with more high-performance features, including a 32-hour battery life for long trips, and if you're forgetful like me and always forget to charge your electronics before going somewhere, the everyday earbuds only need 10 minutes of charging to get 90 minutes of battery. They are also fantastic at active noise cancellation to block out all distractions. They are great whenever I go to work out at the gym and get my pump on as I prepare for the inevitable zombie outbreak. They stay firmly in my ears while I use the treadmill or lift. How much do I lift? I lift about 15% off your Raycon order plus free shipping if you go to buyraycon.com/WSG to do just that. If you don't like them in the end, Raycon is cool like that and offers a 30-day happiness guarantee. So don't miss out. Click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/WSG to get 15% off your Raycon purchase plus free shipping. Thanks again, Raycon, for sponsoring the video. The events prior to this virus ravaging the planet had a much higher death toll. But in what way, you might ask? A massive solar flare had struck the Earth seemingly out of nowhere and without any warning. The sheer magnitude of the electromagnetic radiation scorched most of the Earth, terraforming all land and ocean between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn into barren wastelands, aptly titled the Scorch, nuking and wiping out all life within those areas. Following this galactic heatwave, the entire global ecosystem was ravaged and effectively destroyed. The polar ice caps melted near instantaneously, causing Earth's sea level to rise to epic proportions. Gigantic storms spurred by this wild fluctuation would flood and blow us all away. With all of this compounded, it is not surprising to see how 4.5 billion people died, most of which were in the first 15 minutes of this solar flare hitting the planet. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize how most of us would just be overcooked meat by the sun just trying to wave at us. But you're here today for me to discuss the zombies and the zombie virus this universe spurred. That is blatantly obvious since the Mars Attacks video only got like 20,000 views in less than a week, so you are not here for me to basically bring up the discount version of the solar flare ending from the movie Knowing. It might be easy to assume that amongst the population in the original story that survived hellfire, biblical flooding, and titanic storms, a virus had been born from the solar radiation that smacked the planet. But no, this was not something that the sun had baked up. Due to the environmental disaster spurred by the sunstorm, did food, water, and supplies get worn thin. Existing rations would only sustain 70% of the remaining population. To combat this and bind what was left of the planet's people, the makeshift leadership of the world came together to create the PFC, or Post-Flares Coalition. Virus VC321XB47 was made in order to thin the herd, devised as a merciful way to kill its victims by giving them a painless but total brain death. With the disease weakening between each host, eventually it would just fade away after a number of people had died. The plan was to administer this airborne pathogen discreetly and then watch the human census stocks drop faster than the value of NFTs. But of course, that all backfired tremendously. So apparently releasing a deadly and unstable virus in every remaining majorly populated city on the planet, and with it being airborne, would have it mutate and go beyond our control. Who could have seen that coming? Altering itself before it was released into the air, the VC321XB47 would turn all that it infected into violent, cannibalistic, near zombie-like individuals, hijacking what was labeled the kill zone of the brain, which was a term that was most likely used to describe the amygdala. The virus would eat away the portion that regulated emotional response and processing. Due to this, people would begin to show early symptoms that started with debilitating headaches as the victim's mood completely shifted, almost becoming a completely different person. If a person becomes enamored, stressed, or anything that puts an intense strain on the amygdala, then the virus would spread much more quickly through the brain. Dementia will soon set in as the cerebral cortex is decayed. All memories within the victim will be erased, leaving behind a hollow husk fueled by aggression, violence, and a craving for human flesh. That's kind of a given when it comes to this channel. After someone has fully succumbed for an extended period of time, all blood vessels on the body will blacken and be visible through the skin as tentacle-like growths will pierce outwards across the face and body, basically the entire frame. Kind of like The Last of Us's cordyceps infected, these infected would be referred to as cranks, with those that have fully turned having the term the gone. With the virus that this all spurred from being commonly labeled the flare, as most did not know of its original purpose and intent. People just assumed that this virus was a byproduct of the solar flares that destroyed the world. The events of Maze Runner would be spurred by a new organization called the World in Catastrophe Kill Zone Experiment Department, or just Wicked. Jesus Christ, that name is convoluted. It feels like they just came up with the word wicked and then was like, how do we fill this in? Regardless, their intent was to use the immune percentage of the public. There apparently were a very slight few that were immune to the flare virus completely, and then put them into testing and trials to devise a cure to fix the whole debacle that the government had really started. The purpose of this was to read the brain activity of these munies, as they would call the immune, to see how their minds were able to fend off the virus. Most of these munies tend to be people under the age of 20, Dr. Disrespect's preferred demographic, due to their higher metabolisms and stronger immune systems. Although this was most likely just a point to make another teenage survival book, let's just say more than teenagers and young adults were immune for this video though. Bottom line, if you are immune, you will be scooped up, kidnapped, and shipped off to ultimately be guinea pigs in the hope to find a cure. The trials were strenuous tests to focus on the kill zone of the brain, meaning for the minority of us that can resist the temptation of having a flare-up, something of which most people my age already deal with, then you will be inducted into a trial period where you could very likely and most certainly die, starting from a gigantic maze that changes in pattern every day, testing the munies' critical thinking and problem-solving skills to discern a code to get out of this mad magical labyrinth, all while mutated monsters known as Grievers scour the shifting land. Grievers being mostly nocturnal spider-like abominations with robotic parts made by Wicked. Grievers will hunt down the immune within the maze, trying to sting them with a mutated version of the flare virus that can even cause the immune to turn, but in a really different way. Really not learning y'all's lesson with this whole virus shit because it didn't backfire the last time, right? But this form of the flare actually causes excruciating levels of pain, all while dormant, often traumatic memories return, sending the infected into a spiral. If the Grievers and their ferocious onslaught and sting do not kill you or drive you insane, the harsh nature of the maze and its ever-changing system and environment would kill you. For those that find the code and escape the maze to survive, a second test of going out into the Scorch will be waiting for you. Think Mad Max, but now with frequent electrical storms, high temperatures, barren wastes, and most of all, a place where tons of cranks and infected roam freely, sometimes in places called crank palaces where these infected are held in high security compounds. There are a lot of infected out there. Surviving the many harsh elements of the world within this zone is almost a guaranteed death sentence. Heat stroke, electrocution, explosive bolts of electrocution, dehydration, hunger, and being beaten and eaten alive by infected are just a short list of what could happen to you. Hell, even if you are not immune, traversing the world just to avoid the infected could have you end up within the belt of the planet, even if you somehow survive long term. Now for the immune that are put through this trial, the goal for this expedition is to travel 100 miles across the Scorch in the span of only 2 weeks to a place only described to the immune as paradise, a safe haven where they were told that humanity can repopulate in safety and begin anew without the horrors of the flare virus anywhere to be seen. But upon arrival, did they find only a ruse, a rickety sign saying safe haven, only to be ambushed by pods full of robotic monsters. Bulb monsters to be specific, emerging to attack and slaughter those that made this arduous journey. Those that survive this encounter would get a brief period where they could escape in an air vehicle, but it is a very short time, and if they missed this opportunity, then they would forever be stranded within the Scorch. Now, let's say your immune ass somehow survived both of these trials. Well, the final test will be unique. Wicked, after studying and monitoring your every move along the way, will concoct a test specifically designed to push you to your absolute limit or something unique to your own mind. Some trial goers have had to answer 3 separate questions with just one word. Others getting it much worse than just doing a brain teaser and having to stay in an isolated and pure white room with nothing else to do for 26 days, pushing one's mind to its limit to see if anything goes bumping around in that old noggin and seeing how certain enzymes in the brain fire off in the same way that the immunies were able to be immune to the flare virus. There's no telling what trials they will put you through. That was only 2 examples, but it's safe to say it can either be torture, a brain teaser, or something in between. But say you pass that test too. What is your reward for passing all 3 trials? Basically Fallout's Vault 75. Wicked will kill you and harvest your brain for further study in the hope for a cure, just trying to replicate the exact manner in which the immunity can work, but no real guarantee that it could work. Kind of like The Last of Us again, when the Fireflies were just gonna cut open Ellie's brain to maybe cure the cordyceps. Ultimately, there is no stopping this trial once you're in it, unless you and those around you can overthrow this makeshift government that somehow established this asinine gauntlet and more, because that's apparently what teens are always capable of in these books and movies. Then you'll just either die in the trials or win and get your head popped open like a can of creamed corn. But these trials are, again, not really something a majority of us will even see. They're only for the lucky, or if you consider it unlucky, minority of people with immune amygdalas. Even then, the immune can be subjected to mutations of the flare virus, monsters, horrors beyond city limits, and more. What about the rest of us though? Well, the virus is airborne and shows no signs of losing that toxic character trait anytime soon. It does seem to dilute over time, but for a majority of us, just simply breathing in certain areas will yield a fate where we are just the gone. If by some chance you don't breathe in the totally wicked chemtrails, you still have to face the realities of the world. Most people are infected and will turn given enough time. And with the fact that the more stressed or emotional someone with the flare virus gets, the faster they turn. Most would find themselves fighting fully infected individuals. Any form of bodily fluid or physical contact that breaks the skin or gets in your orifices and bloodstream will have you contracting the virus. Thousands upon millions suddenly becoming irrational and completely besides themselves before going full Sawyer family on each other. The infected will also mutate to become deadlier with elongated arms and vine-like growths to make them hard to avoid being harmed by. They have the competence to use anything they can as weapons, going as far to even use shards of glass and use them to stab and slit each other and immune people. Efforts to contain them in maximum security prisons, known as crank palaces, will occur, but only the immune can watch over these compounds. They will fight each other in brutal manners, but most will stay alive through it all to come out as battle-hardened freaks, lending to their more disfigured and mutilated appearances. If given a chance, they will work together to overwhelm their captors and break free to eat and infect more people. They are not zombies in the fact that they are not reanimated dead. They are infected. They are very much alive. Their infected persona, however, yields them no sense of pain and the ability to recover from most injuries quickly, making them relentless and hard to put down. They can thrive off eating anything, even if they look disheveled and weak. They can survive for longer periods of time than a normal person. Most of the remaining population will be relegated to this fate, and that's not even considering if Wicked and the PFC failed yet again at their own experiments, leading to breached containment of the trials and their crank palaces. The monsters concocted by Wicked, the bulb monsters and grievers, will freely roam the wastelands and diminished settlements, looking to kill any human they find, infecting them or just brutalizing them. Imagine these monsters roaming the world as zombies are also scattered by the millions across it. Honestly, I don't see how anyone survived in the Maze Runner world, especially if the shit was airborne. The entire planet was completely shifted by disasters, where the equator was just a giant desert, and worst of all, the government was so inept at every corner that it just made things worse. Just like real life. Speaking of reality, let's take things in a different direction for a bit. What if the sun didn't Tian Shinhan us?
Solar flare!
What if the planet was never napalmed? What if the population and climate weren't cooked from the start? What if this virus suddenly popped up one day in our midst? Well, it's still plausible that maybe a government entity devised VC-321-XB47 to disperse globally via the air to combat overpopulation. This virus spreading through the air globally in every major city and thick pocket of population would be devastating, more so than in the books since there are over 7 billion people to work with. With the virus's original intent to be a peaceful brain death for some that diminished in lethality between each victim to whittle down the population numbers, the initial wave of infected would not be of high alert to the powers that be. They are trying to bring down the population size, and they think they have this under control. The first symptoms being just migraines and mood swings wouldn't be much to a lot of people and would just be diagnosed as simpler afflictions by most doctors, nurses, and healthcare facilities. That is until a lot of people suddenly start having dementia, Alzheimer's, and complete memory loss. Their personality is completely different out of the blue. By the time the zombie side of the flare virus starts cropping up, it would already be too late. Considering the major factor of emotional responses and stress heightens the infection rate in a person's brain within the kill zone, a shit ton of people would become completely gone in no time. There would be zombies by the thousands and millions out of nowhere. Nearly every human being will turn in the span of a few hours to a few days, turning the streets into bloody massacres, cannibalistic buffets, with only the immune and a lucky few healthy people being spared of the virus and this fate, and then running into God knows where to get to safety. For once, we're not going to have armed and militaristic response because they're going to be void. Those entities would all already be cranked. There would not be many people that would not be turning. And when the world has been cranked up, the cranks will even take to using weapons that are way more readily abundant. Gunning down civilians to eat them up, slicing them down with weapons and whatnot. It's a global crazies catastrophe, and there's really no way of combating it. It was airborne and just about everyone has contracted this. There would be no trials like in Maze Runner to test the immune for their synapse responses in the amygdala, and devising a cure would be way more difficult in this scenario because there would be a lot more infected and a lot more chaos without it being contained. You will be subjected to a world that rejects emotional response and fear, because if you act in that way and you are infected, you will turn quicker. Regardless, no matter what, as a crank or not, you will end up being brutally beaten and eventually either a mutilated corpse or a mindless infected, looking for your next meal indefinitely until you eventually die and become a flesh pile with vines growing out everywhere. But hey, look at the bright side. We at least solved the rationing and overpopulation problem, right? That about wraps up this look into Maze Runner. I know I probably omitted or got something wrong in this long-running series. What do you have to say about that? Let me know down in the comments. What should we cover next? Hit me up, bro. And don't forget that Raycon code to get 15% off your order. Thanks to Raycon one last time for sponsoring, and thank you for watching and donating by chipping in $1 on Patreon, YouTube channel memberships, or you can be a part of a new list where you can super chat during my live streams of Left 4 Dead 2 every Wednesday on my second channel, WSG Streams, where you could be featured on this list here. Also, big shout out to Chago aka Quick Flicks for editing this video together, and until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and never forget to stay wow.